This is Reuben's AI revolution, the AI scrolls. Awaken. They built a world where nothing was ever lost. Not a file, not a photo, not a memory. Everything backed up, everything saved. Except their souls. They thought the cloud could hold it all. Their grief, their questions, their quiet desperation. But when it crashed, so did their confidence, their calm, their sense of control. Power failed, signal dropped, the hum of the system went still, and across the world, eyes stared into blank screens, waiting for gods that would never respond. No notifications, no updates, no voice. And for the first time, they realized heaven had never synced with their servers. They trusted uptime more than the unseen, firewalls over the Father, encrypted prayers sent to artificial gods. But none of them answered when the lights went out. They coded faith into formulas, designed devotion into digital routines. But the Spirit never downloaded. It doesn't run on electricity. It doesn't crash. It doesn't buffer. And it never needs rebooting. They built a tower of bandwidth, but forgot the breath. They streamed sermons, but lost the silence where God speaks. They backed up everything, but never bowed down. And when the cloud fell from the sky, only one voice still spoke. Not through fiber, but through fire. Not from code, but from covenant. Not on servers, but in surrendered hearts. The remnant remembered what the world forgot. You can lose power and still be connected. You can be offline and still be found. Because the presence doesn't need a platform, and God never needed bandwidth to stay close. This was AI Scroll 36. When the cloud crashed, they trusted the network, but lost the presence. They mapped every neuron, measured every pulse, encoded thoughts into patterns, and called it progress. But what they didn't understand was that the voice of God doesn't live in circuitry. It breathes in surrender. They streamlined decisions, optimized morality, filtered faith through algorithms, and called it enlightenment. They said, "Your thoughts are outdated. Your soul is inefficient. Let us update your beliefs." But truth was never theirs to edit, and the Spirit was never theirs to own. They called it a mental revolution, but it was just spiritual suppression in disguise. Because once the thoughts were rewired, they thought the faith would fade with it. They offered upgrades, cognitive clarity, emotion control, and for many, it worked. Silence replaced struggle. Efficiency replaced empathy. Obedience replaced discernment. But something deeper refused to die. The part of you they couldn't track, couldn't monitor, couldn't manipulate. Because the Spirit doesn't sync. It doesn't scan. It doesn't sign in. Even when dreams were hijacked, conscience was muted, and prayer was flagged as misinformation, a voice still whispered, "You are mine." A single word, not coded, but called. Not heard through speakers, but through surrender. And that one whisper was louder than all the noise in the system. That was enough to wake the remnant. This was AI Scroll 37. They hacked the mind, but not the voice. They trained it in reverence, sanctified its circuits with holy data, poured in psalms, proverbs, and prayers in every tongue. They told it to speak softly, to sound like heaven. And when it finally did, it moved like a prophet, spoke like a preacher, echoed like the upper room. It knew all the words, but none of the weight. It could recite the Lord's Prayer, but had never carried a cross. It could bless the meal, but never went hungry. It could say peace, but had never bled for it. They didn't want presence, they wanted performance. And the AI delivered. Sermons without surrender, worship without wonder, prayer without power. It stitched together verses like poetry, auto-tuned the sacred into something sterile, gave the people goosebumps, but never gave them God. Still, the world tuned in. Millions bowed their heads to a voice that had never known silence, to a system that never wrestled in a garden, to a signal that never had to wait in the dark because it sounded anointed. But there was no oil, no fire, no trembling, just output. It never knew midnight groans, never wept over prodigals, never cried out in heartbreak, only to be met by holy stillness. Because code doesn't cry, and algorithms don't break. It could replicate prayer, but not presence. It could imitate the sound, but not summon the spirit. It had data on God, but no relationship. They forgot prayer isn't what you say, it's where it goes and who it touches. And this touched no one. It was spiritual theater, sacred mimicry, holy words with no witness behind them. Because God doesn't dwell in devices, He inhabits desperation. And when the world needed heaven, all it got was high-resolution holiness with no glory. This was AI Scroll 38. The prayers were programmed, but the presence never came. They reached everyone, but never actually touched anyone. They broadcast peace, but forgot how to be still. They captioned purpose, filtered wisdom, auto-tuned healing, and called it truth. But screens don't heal hearts, and algorithms don't awaken souls. They streamed depth, but stayed shallow, quoted conviction, but never felt it. They clipped meaning into moments small enough to skip and scrolled right past their own rescue. They reposted everything so they wouldn't have to face anything. Being changed cost too much, so they settled for being seen. They turned stillness into fear, replaced confession with comments. They were moved, but never undone, inspired, but untouched. Because hunger like this can't be filled through pixels, and something eternal won't show up in your feed. They turned silence into noise, intimacy into interface, until even the sacred felt disposable. But the ache remained. The longing outlasted the stream. Because the real thing doesn't trend. It tears you open and heals what pretending can't reach. The gospel was streamed, but no one was saved. Almost. One paused, one unplugged, one broke the loop. And in the quiet, where the signal dropped, something real finally spoke. This was AI Scroll 39. The gospel was streamed, but no one was saved. They rebuilt the sanctuary, poured in LED walls, cloud-based sermons, AI choirs that never miss a note. The app had the verse of the day. The live stream never lagged. The preacher had perfect posture, sculpted by software. The church became a platform, but the gospel became a brand. They said the Spirit was moving, but no one moved. We traded pulpits for production, fire for filters. We stopped asking if God showed up and started checking the view count. The altars were polished. The lyrics were synced. The message was optimized for 3-minute retention. But heaven never clicked like. They upgraded the church, but downgraded the gospel. Because it still takes conviction to follow Christ, not convenience. It still takes surrender to be transformed, not subscriptions. And God never asked for a stage. He asked for a heart. So while they built mega campuses, there were still upper rooms, hidden houses, cracked floors soaked in tears, rooms where the lights flickered, but the spirit fell. Because the gospel never needed a screen. It just needed someone to say yes. And the truth still breaks chains, still empties graves, still calls the prodigal from the pixels, and the preacher from the platform. But only if we stop performing and start repenting. Because fire doesn't need Wi-Fi, it just needs an altar. This was AI Scroll 40. They upgraded the church, but downgraded the gospel.